Welcome everyone to the second IEA webinar. Around the world, we have gathered international experts in the area of work from home and looking at human factors and ergonomic considerations. And we look forward to your input and your questions when we get to those question and answer period at the end of our webinar. I'd like you to introduce myself as Dr. Michelle Robertson, and my co-chair is Dr. Sarah Alabino, and we're both part of the IEA Executive Committee. Sarah is our Vice President of IEA. Also like to introduce you to Dr. Kathleen Mosier, who is our IEA President, and Lynn Strother, who has been helping us with the logistics of the webinar, and I'd like to thank all of them. So moving forward, we are going to be recording this session. So I'd like to have everyone be aware of that, and also to remind all of us of the recording that we will be able to access after the webinar itself. So those of you who have to leave early or want to listen to another presentation, this gives you the opportunity to do so. Here's our list of our panelists. As you can see, they are experts from around the world. So we're going to get some fantastic presentations and discussions around work from home and looking at the different aspects of it. We also have two presentations that are pre-recorded, and we will be including those when we send out the link to this recorded session. Just due to the time zone of Japan and Australia, they were not able to join us, but they were able to present and record their research that they have done in the area of work from home. So I would just like to propose to you a model here, which many of our colleagues will be discussing and looking at. This is a macroergonomics work system model. The philosophy that we have had, and Kathleen and I have written a think piece for the ILO, looking at the systems approach to telework and work from home. So the organizational level, there are certain components of the human factors ergonomics that need to be determined. Looking at the personnel and technology system. We move into the group and the team area, studying the psychosocial and the work organizational factors. And then sort of at the microergonomic area is looking at the workstation design, the human-computer interface, and other psychosocial issues that are related to the individual and their well-being and performance. All of these, as we know, are impacted by our external environment as we're all working from home now. So the research that we've had in the last 20 years of looking at telework has allowed us to understand and examine some of these areas that we want to understand better. So as we move forward into new hybrid offices and new ways of working, I think it's going to be important for us to address. There are some references here that I provide to you, and we've done a lot of work in this area and working with ILO and WHO on coming up with practical guidelines as well. So I'd like to move into our first presenter, and he's Dr. Robert Bridger, and he's a human factors ergonomics consultant. And he's written two excellent textbooks, and the last one was a guide to the active working in a modern office. And he's also the past president of the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors of the United Kingdom. Bob, please share your screen, and the stage is yours.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Well, hello, everyone. I thought I'd just start the webinar today with a few thoughts about working from home. For most of human history, most people worked from home or very close to their homes. That's why we can say, well, is working from home really just old wine in new bottles? So a lot of production and production itself and its control were decentralized. So working in offices and factories is, on a mass scale anyway, is an aspect of the Industrial Revolution. and with production and control becoming centralized in large offices and factories. This is an early 20th century office called the Larkin Building. And it's really just a paperwork factory. And people went to work in offices because that's where the work was. In a digitized world, what requirements would an office such as this actually fulfill? That's an interesting question, which I'll return to a little bit later on. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated a trend towards an increased amount of work being carried out away from offices, from home or from home working centres, which are sometimes referred to as third places. The effects of this transition are not yet known, certainly not in the UK, partly because the world outside the home has not yet returned to normal because of COVID-19 restrictions. So what the future holds in store for us is really, well, we'll have to wait and see. But today I want to focus on some of the possible pros and cons of home working. These are things that provide exploitation pathways for human factors research and practice. So they're opportunities for those of us who both consult and also do research in human factors. I'm going to end my presentation by asking whether the office has had its day. My question is, what requirements do offices meet in a digitized service economy like we have in the UK? And given that we can identify those requirements and specify them, what are the key performance indicators that should be measured to provide evidence that these requirements are being met? Now, here's a topic that's very close to my heart. This is sedentarism and its effects, long-term effects on the health of populations. For at least 70 years, to my knowledge, human factors and ergonomics experts have strived to improve the comfort of sedentary workers. However, sedentary lifestyles are known to be hazardous to health in themselves. So the irony is that we've been making unhealthy work practices comfortable to adopt, or should I say, comfortable to endure. Here's some results from a paper by Van der Ploeg et al. 2012 entitled Sitting Time and All-Cause Mortality Risk in 222,497 Australian Adults. During 621,695 person years of follow-up, 4,405 deaths were registered. All-cause mortality hazard ratios, that's like risk of dying for any reason, were compared in people who sat for more than 4 hours per day and people who sat for less than 4 hours per day, adjusting for physical activity and other confounders. Anyway, what they found was that once you get above 8 hours of sitting per day, all-cause mortality risk increases. And once you get more than 11 hours of sitting all day, it increases even more. The authors concluded that prolonged sitting is a risk factor for all-cause mortality. Shorter sitting times and sufficient physical activity are independently protective against all-cause mortality, not just for healthy individuals, but also for those with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, overweight, or obesity. And even people who exercise regularly may benefit from sitting less. So, given that people are working from home, given that in the UK, the average commuting time to work is about 1 hour there and back, so 2 hours of commuting per day spent mostly in a seated position, this presents an opportunity for home workers to reduce their daily sedentary time and to mitigate health risks if the time spared is used effectively. Anecdotally, gym usage at my tennis and fitness club has increased during the weekday as home workers use the saved commuting time to flex work around other activities. However, this only applies, as far as we know, to existing gym goers. Working from home creates the potential to reduce daily sitting time because of time saved not commuting. But what about people for whom walking to work or the bus stop or to the train station is their only physical activity? are they going to sit even more if they don't have to go to work? So this is potentially a very interesting area for us to investigate from the perspective of physical health. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors and the IEA, in fact, and other organizations and ergonomic societies published guidance for home office workers in response to COVID-19 restrictions. But there's some scientific questions that need to be answered before we can decide whether we're actually giving people the right advice in the long term. Is this guidance really efficacious? Is it what home workers really need to know, or is it what we think they need to know? To be really effective, any kind of training should be based on a training needs analysis and some idea about what the long-term risks of home working are likely to be. There are some psychosocial and organisational risks that should also be considered. I'm not convinced that this kind of ergonomic guidance is as useful as it looks, and I would be really interested to see the results of any published research that demonstrates its long-term effectiveness. And I'd be very grateful if anyone has access to any research on that, if they could send me a copy. I'd like to talk briefly about psychosocial and organisational stresses and the pros and cons of working at home. One way to consider this, and one place to start, is with the well-known demand control model of occupational stress, where adverse reactions or stress reactions are more likely when people are exposed to high demands over which they have low control. So when you shift from working in an office to working at home, there are questions about how do the demands change and how does the control that people have over those demands change? Well, the answer is probably going to be, it depends what the demands are. So for some things, people may get more control when they work at home. They may have better work-life balance. The time saved not commuting may increase the control they have over other aspects of life. There are also some demands called the self-control demands, which you have when you work in offices, such as self-presentation with respect to appearance, behavior, and so on, and how you respond to challenges in public. These demands may be lessened by working from home. On the other hand, for people working at home, there'll be problems of social isolation, particularly people who live on their own in, say, one-bedroom apartments with nowhere else to go and isolated from family and friends. People may have difficulty disengaging from work. There may be unpleasant distractions at home, such as young children who are difficult to manage. And there are also management issues, a failure to management to adapt to the realities of staff. At a recent webinar run by DigiWorks, I was asked what advice I would give to organizations about how they should change the way they manage home working employees. And I made two main suggestions. These are partly based on my experience as head of department and a line manager of 5 staff. The first piece of advice I gave was that organizations are responsible for providing a safe workplace for their staff, so home working must be formalized once COVID-19 restrictions are removed. This removes ambiguity and gives both sides better control. Secondly, ergonomic problems in offices are often a sign of bad management, or at least a lack of proper management. As Frederick W. Taylor pointed out many years ago, it's management's job to manage and to provide a suitable working conditions for productivity. As an ex-manager myself, I think managers need to consider the way they make performance agreements with their staff and how they assess the performance of their staff. So just to finish then, has the office had its day? I'd like to talk briefly about affordances and third places. Third places, as in the examples in the slide, are social surroundings separate from the home, which is the first place, and the workplace, which is the second place. And examples are environments such as remote working centres, cafes, clubs, libraries, and so on. Apart from the affordance to conduct work away from the office and the home, third places may also encourage the formation of new social groups in local communities as people from different companies go to the same third place to work. Social anthropologists call these primary groups. In the right-hand side, we can see a concept design for what's called an affordance workplace, supporting natural and spontaneous postural behaviour. This is due from Rietveld Architecture Art Affordances and the artist Barbara Visser. It's an experimental workspace stroke art installation. They say, we have developed a concept wherein the chair and the desk are no longer unquestionable starting points. Instead, the installation's various affordances solicit visitors to explore different standing positions in an experimental work landscape. The kind of landscape that you could work in if you had mobile devices, a laptop and a phone and so on. So overall, I think much of traditional ergonomics and the thinking behind it is obsolete, except for employees working at fixed stations with their mobile technologies. In particular, we need to move beyond requirement specification and the setting of standards and start thinking about how to design systems that deliver the affordances to maximize efficiency and well-being in the future. Whilst office ergonomics has delivered better work environments and reduced exposure to immediate risks, the health of the population of many developed countries has worsened over the last 50 years. So if we are to return to office work and the daily commute, some good questions to ask are, what requirements do traditional offices meet that can't be met elsewhere? And what key performance indicators should we use to assess whether these requirements are met in order to justify the investment? Well, that introduces the theme. Thank you very much for listening. I'll be happy to take questions later on.
Thank you, Bob. That was a very interesting presentation, and I really liked how you were balancing our different behaviors of looking at sedentary behavior and how we're going to look at that in a home environment and then moving back into the office. I thought your discussion about affordances and how those lead to key performance indicators, I think is really important. And some of my research that I've done with looking at management performance agreements, when we did a longitudinal study on the virtual office, one of the key areas was establishing those performance agreements between management and the employees themselves. So thank you for bringing those up. That was excellent. And Sarah, I will turn it over to you for our next presenter, please.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. And I'm very happy to see all these people at this webinar. And I wish to thank all the panelists again for the participation. And I'm very happy to introduce the next panelist, that is Dr. Laerte Idal Schnerbar. Is co-chair of the IEA Organizational Design and Management Technical Committee, associate professor of the Department for Industrial Engineering of the Escola Politécnica, Universidad de Sao Paulo in Brazil, and he is going to talk about work from home, personal suffering, and societal challenges. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Let's see if I can put my presentation. Just one moment, please.
Yes.
I have many different, let's put in the presentation modes. Let's see if it works.
Thank you.
No, it's not working. It's not this. It's not this I want to share. Is this one. Is it working? All right. Oh, it's okay?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for your invitation. I'm really happy to be with you, not being with you actually, but thanks Michelle, thanks Sarah, thanks Lynn and everybody, our colleagues that are the panelists, and also for everybody that are listening to us and could join us by the internet. Well, how is my screen? I have just changed the screen, or it's okay? I'm making a bit of confusion here.
And it disappeared on you.
Yeah.
It's back.
Now it's okay? Okay. How is it for you?
If it be a little bigger,
It's better?
that's better. Yes.
Okay. I'm just having a problem here with my, and how it is now. Because I can't see my paper. When
It's
I put
okay.
my paper, it changes. No? Okay.
It's okay. You can use it like that. I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can.
Because I had my presentation and also my paper, and I thought it could have in the same screen. Okay, let's do it. Well, I'm gonna talk to you about some issues related to mental health. And in this speech, I will try to talk with you. I will try to, sorry. I will try to put some questions and evidence that we are discussing here with my colleagues and other works we could do at university also related to work at home or working from home or at home. And it is important to put in evidence that we are using a conceptual framework related to a discipline called the psychodynamics of work, relating work organization and mental health and psychic health. Well, it's a kind of very related, in my point of view, to what we do in macroergonomics. Well, as I'm speaking from related to the next 2 years and 1 year and a half, more precisely, I'm talking about COVID times. I'm talking about what we are facing, especially in Brazil. And one of the main things related to our experience is one important issue is related to uncertainty. I didn't know, I can guess we didn't have any certainty before, but many people thought that we had. We had also on dismantling the routines. We changed a lot the way we do, how we do related to different things. And I will try to put some issues later. And the things is the doubt. Are we capable to do the things we are doing before in another context, in other conditions related to changes also in terms of work organization, especially we can't see, we are not in contact with our colleagues. Another big issue for us is the relationship with death, because we are facing that in a different way that we are facing before. And one thing that was taught as something that was immutable became fluid and questionable. It's important to say also and to say that in Brazil we have a great problem because we have a negationist government, and we are facing a lot of problems related to that. But going in more precisely in what I was guessing about talking about with you, one of the main issues is related to time. Time is different now. It's strange. We can't have the same relationship to time we had before. We don't have the same scenarios where we are working, not only in terms of space, but in terms of time. Because in some way we had a regulation of time. We knew how many hours or how many minutes we had to take in consideration to go to our office, to our work and coming back home. Now the time is different. Our routines, our relationship to the day and the night, sometimes they have been collapsed. And it's interesting because also when we are isolated, we have also different relationship between how one activity is followed by others. And this is really interesting. For example, in my experience, I can go from one consultation and on meeting to another in terms of seconds. And so it's really different in terms of how I can experience time. And time actually, it's really, we can measure time, but it's always a question related to our subjectivity, because we are experiencing what we are doing, we are experiencing the time related to what we are developing. As I said before, we have and we are facing many people testimony that we have an intensification of our activities because we actually don't know what is happening in terms of the schedule, in terms of how my activity will be developed and when I will achieve it. Because one important thing is related to when I have finished something that I'm doing. And if I can do further, if I can do more. So one thing it's really interesting that we have an intensification because our time is more condensed. As I said, the intertime, it's really something that perhaps it's another challenge because the intertime, when we could change what we were doing, it's also condensed. Another thing I was discussing, and also I think it's really important, is the question of space. Because also our relationship with space changed. Our urban space, the city is different because we are not anymore in the city. Yes, certainly we can go and we are able, and here we can get out of our home, but we are necessarily, we are not going to other situation. We are living all these things in the same space. We are working, we are living with our family, with our relatives, or even other people. And when we think about confinement, the question of space becomes even worse, even more challenging, because how can I think about when I can get out of here? And it's important to say that there are enormous differences related to working at home. Sometimes we think in ergonomics, as ergonomists, our point of view say, our conditions, our working situation, our working stations, are they adaptable or they are fit to us? But the question is, I think it's more challenging because many people live in very, very small homes. And even worse, with many people living together. So how can we work in good conditions in this kind of situation? This is really important because in these situations, sometimes we have to be with people that we love, that we don't love at the same way. And it's important to see, I don't have the statistics here, but we are facing, at least in our country, an increase in domestic violence. It's important. It's especially against women and children. Well, talking about the workstation, it's important to say that my workplace can be anywhere in my home. And sometimes I have to change my working station from one piece to another in my home. As I said before, some people don't have this possibility. As was told before, working at home or working from home somehow, it's really something related to human history. We can see different kinds of activities that we were always working from home or at home. And even dangerous, toxic activities we're doing in this situation. Another thing, it's important, I don't know exactly the situation in other countries, but working from home also needs access to a good internet, access to good signal, access to possibility to have also computers or cell phones. And it's also a question related to inequality in these conditions. And I can say with our students at university, we're facing a very big challenge because some of them don't have the conditions to stay at home and continue studying. But they can't go to university because universities here are still closed. Well, the question of the contacts, we have an impression we are in contact with more people because in our platforms we can talk as we are doing now with many people at the same time, but actually with whom we are really in contact. Well, I would like to still talk about something that changed a lot, because when we think about work as a regulated activity, but it's always a constrained activity, it requires mastery, it requires knowledge. And part of it now, it's being challenged. We don't know exactly how to do, as I talked before. Some kinds of disorder were exacerbated in this situation. And this disorder is related to what we do at home. How can we do the different activities, thinking about our time, the relationship with others, and in our companies, in our university, with whom we are working with. And so we have a question of more and more uncertainty, and this is really related to our suffering. When it's going to finish? If it's going to finish? And if we are going to face more and more hybrid activities, working at home and offices, hospitals, and other activities. It's important to say in the hospitals and other kinds of activities, people are still working in the situation, in the hospital as well, not only in other kinds of work, we can say the same thing. Well, I have many things to talk. I have a big text here, but I want to finish now talking about ephemerality. Okay, that's okay. So I'm going to respect the time. COVID times are putting in our face the question of ephemerality, because we are facing a different position relating to life and death, but not also, because many things that we do working, but not only working in terms of what is regulated as work, we don't know exactly what have been achieved, as I talked before. So it's important to say that we have a main issue related to non-fulfillment of our identity, our subjectivity, of non-working, and also feeling that we are changing and we have the possibility of to change what actually means a work that have sense. We are discussing what is important in terms of activity we are developing, and so we have to face the challenge to develop a meaningful life. And meaningful life is related to others. And we have to think about things that are more perennial, more relational, and more connected. And excuse me for the time, but thank you very much for listening to me. Bye.
Thank you very much. I really liked your the words that you are using, like uncertainty, becoming fluid and questionable. I think, of course, we need a shift of paradigm in order to face these new words in our life, and a shift of identity as human beings, and also, as you were mentioning, a new way of thinking our relationships. So thank you so much for introducing these keywords, and I think that really important also for working. That is of course a very important part of our daily life, but it's a shift of paradigm in our daily life. And that's the way we need to put it into the context. So thank you very much. And I will leave the word to Michelle for the next panelist.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, I'm very pleased to introduce Professor Dr. Epstein. She's from the Danish Technical University of Denmark, and she's also part of the IEA Organizational Design and Management Technical Committee. I think her research is going to be very revealing and illuminating when we're looking at the management side. So, Professor, please.
Sorry, of course, here. Yeah, thank you for the invitation to be here this morning or afternoon or evening. I think we have so many different nationalities and time zones. That's really, really great. Yes, and it's true, Michelle. I would like to say something about part of the studies that we've done the last year about distance management and working from home, but in particular about data or the results that we have from the management side. So as you know, currently we're all discussing return to work and how much and should we or not, and in which format should it be, fully remote or in a hybrid form. And that's also being discussed in Denmark. So what I will share with you are some of the results we have from an international study that we've conducted the last year, and also some Danish results from 2 different studies. So these are just some front pages from the last few weeks about where are we now. There is this discussion about the fully remote work or the hybrid remote, and there is not really an alignment about what is the best way. And I guess that's also what everybody's experienced at the moment. How should we return and in what format? So what is the best way? Is it about coherence and the work community? Is it about the flexibility and the personal preferences? Is it about the carbon footprint? Is it about transportation? Is it about climate? There's so many discussions going on at the moment. And of course, it's not settled that, or we haven't really found that optimum yet. So going back a year, we were also sent home at our university here in Denmark. And in my section that I'm leading, we normally eat lunch together, so we couldn't do that. So we decided to meet on Slack and the Slack platform. And very soon we said, shouldn't we set up a survey about the experience of working from home? And we've previously worked with distance management, distance work, and how to ensure productivity and well-being. So that was something that was quite close to what we had already done. So we set up the survey, and the 20th of March last year, we launched it and have currently, I think it's 29,000 responses worldwide. But what I'm presenting here are some of the results from Europe, which is approximately 5,000 responses, mainly from knowledge-intensive work. And if you think back about the research and the literature that we have on telework and working from home, you often see a list of different advantages and disadvantages. But when we've in this survey, we could see that they fold out, or you can say they cluster around these 6 dimensions. So these are the 3 advantages and the 3 disadvantages that we can actually see to go across the European data set. So the 3 key advantages is about work-life balance, having the ability just to decide on your own routines. You have more time for social life and less commuting. And then you have the work efficiency. You can have a break when you want, and you're not being disturbed by others. And then you can focus on the task that is meaningful to you. And then, of course, you have control over the day. So these, you can say, topics or the clusters are not surprising, but now we can actually group them and use them as you can say, decision support tool. And then there are the disadvantages about the home office constraints, the feeling of isolation, less social contact, a lot of time in front of the computer. The work uncertainties, what is actually the value of work? What am I supposed to do? Do I have enough tasks? And do I have tasks that my manager will actually acknowledge, etc.? And finally, there is a concern about the inadequate tools. So actually, am I able to do my work? Do I have access to what I need, technologies, documents, etc.? So when we have these dimensions, it's actually possible for us to map different groups that can be across gender, age, functions, different groups that groups of people or functions that we would like to look into, or life situations, for example. So when we're comparing, for example, managers and employees, then we saw already from the beginning that managers in Denmark, and because these are Danish numbers, that they actually experience working from home a bit more stressful or demanding as the employees' responses. So it was about around 30% that would say it's more demanding than my normal work, and it was 41, I think, percent that would say among the managers that this is actually more demanding than my normal work. So that, of course, made us curious about what is actually going on when we talk about distance work and this transition of new ways of working. So we set up a qualitative study where we have followed 13 managers for a year, interviewing them every 6 weeks. And what they say is that they experience longer work days, they have fewer breaks, they feel that they're tied to the computer. It's difficult for them to sense how people are actually doing. So this, you can say, responsibility that they have for people, it's not just about the trust, which was discussed a lot in the beginning, but it's very much about experience, how are people doing, and being there for them. And they also get the sense of being disconnected because they don't have these social touch points that they would have at their workplace. It's time consuming to engage with people. So these informal touch points that they would have at the coffee machine, the water cooler, during the meetings, when they meet each other in the open office, that's suddenly something that they have to formalize and structure, and that takes, of course, more time. And it's both one-to-one meetings, but also these, you can say, team meetings or division meetings, just having the time or the opportunity to meet. So flexibility requires much more structures. So when people are requesting more flexibility and the ability to choose when to come to the office, it requires more structures, and it's more time consuming for the managers. So they're having longer work days and basically just more tasks. So there is a change in leadership and roles, and that is also something that they are concerned about. What is my new role? How am I going to be a good leader that can actually embrace or care for people both when they're working from home and in the office. What is that? What are my new tasks? Then building on that, we got the opportunity to collaborate with the Danish Association of Managers and Executives. And I actually think my good partner is here tonight. But what we realized when we ask questions about how do managers or distance managers perceive and experience this current situation, they would say, sorry, that was a circle wrong, but 43% would say strongly agree or agree that they thrive in the role as distance manager. It's a bit more mixed when we look at the tasks. If their tasks as managers, distance management actually is motivating, they work more hours and they get the sense that they are more productive. So they also get the same benefits as employees do, but it also affects their work. But if they can choose, they would rather be a manager in the office than they would be a distance manager. And I think this is also something to consider when we talk about a new paradigm, that what is actually the effect on managers in this. Because now there is a request from both top management and also employees to have this more flexibility and there's a potential in terms of cost savings, reduction of workspace, travel expense, commute time, etc. So there's a long list of requests and wishes. And in Denmark, and we can read that also internationally, there are current trials going on with different ways of working, 3+1, or 3+2 work weeks, 4-day work weeks, or 4+1, different trials about how can we do this in new ways. But a lot of managers, as we've experienced, and what we can see in our study, is that it's up to them to decide how to make this work. And that can be quite a challenge to find that optimum in for example, among people in your section or your division. So our recommendation is that we are aware that we don't leave it up to managers to find the solutions themselves, but actually think about it as Michelle started saying, this is part of the organization, this is part of a work system that we have to take into consideration. This is not just individual preferences. So I'm just going to do this quickly. So currently, there are so many requests. We want new strategies. We can see there's a need for maybe new buildings, new ways of working. We can save costs. But we're also discussing empowerment, self-management, and on autonomy. We're also discussing which tasks are suited for what and where. We're talking about incentives, KPIs have already been mentioned. And we're also discussing what are the new skills that we need to have to be able to work for example, in a hybrid remote. And this is another systems model, but the whole point of systems model is that these components, they need to be aligned so we actually get the behavior and the performance that we're looking for. So I think that is what is needed now, is instead of discussing all these preferences and what we would like, that we start to see, okay, how are these actually aligned? So I think this is a discussion that is part of this topic, distance management, is part of a much bigger topic, which is related to new technologies and how they enable, but maybe also inhibit things. How does that connect with our well-being and productivity? What is the new role of the office, as Robert also talked about? And the big discussion here is when we talk about sustainable work, generating decent work and economic growth and well-being and mental health, how does this connect with that? So I think that was the message from me tonight. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Professor Christine. Really appreciate your very systems approach and how you're looking at an important role as managers. And I think we say employees, but we also need to reflect and appreciate where our managers are and how their roles have changed so much. I think your STAR model is very illuminating and really helps people to see those connections and how important it is to bring those alignments in. And I think that's a nice way to discuss. I think your really important point is it's like we need to help. I mean, our profession can help in setting up these organizational structures. So thank you very much. Sarah, we'll turn it over to you for our next presenter.
And I would like to add thank you, Christine, because as a manager, I really identify myself with your description, and I think it's a big issue to find a new organizational model for managing at COVID-19 time and afterwards. Anyway, thank you so much. I'm going to introduce the next panelist, Dr. Pernilla Ulf-Bengren, Associate Professor in Industrial Engineering and Sociotechnical System in INDEC School of Industrial Engineering and Management, Royal Institute of Technology, Stockholm, Sweden, and she's going to talk about work system transformation post-COVID-19. Please, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I hope you can hear me well. And presenters mode, there we go. Yes, so yes, as Christina said, good morning, good day, and good evening, good night. I have a background in both engineering and work science. And a year ago, I was contacted from Christina to participate in this international survey. But when we have collected that data, there's a lot of information that we didn't collect that is apparent now that I would like to do for the future. So Christina has presented the main results of the study, and so this will merely be ideas of research that I have developed. Yes, so work system transformation was the main idea, and also work towards sustainable work from home. And well, as we know in this community, as Reason said, 1997, I just think that's very elegant. We cannot change the human condition, but we can change the conditions under which people work. Well, now with COVID, conditions under which people work has changed unintentionally, and it's a very disruptive conditions change. So now the question is, how can we, I mean, in ergonomic and human factors, we are unfortunately still used to be asked afterwards to fix things. But how can we intentionally design and assure sustainable work systems supporting the new conditions of working from home? I want to put forward if we could look at this as this disruptive event, similarly to other areas are studying this as the disruptive event as something very prosperous for innovation, to see this as an opportunity to remind organizations while we have the chance to remind them of some basic socio-technical principles for work. And this was addressed both, I think, by Christina and Robert, that we don't necessarily require new knowledge, because we know a lot about work and that has not changed. So yeah, this is just another system level model then, and not any, but from Rasmussen. And we know that these systems are dynamic. So when we have a disruptive event, it will probably then change conditions and need revisions at many various levels of this system. And that was actually my intent to do that analysis. Just assuming that we will need new laws, regulation, guidelines, and recommendations for workplace analysis and work analysis for work from home. But then I was thinking, well, common requirements for sustainable work environments still apply. We still need the social and organizational conditions. We still need the physical environment to be risk assessed. And so even at my work, at the university, we have discussed this among ourselves, that the employer is accountable still and responsible for the employees' work environment. Some practical issues, many places internationally, but especially Swedish law demands collaboration between employer and employees in ensuring a good work environment. So there are practical issues even for these aspects, of course, that has become maybe what we discuss most and foremost, because it becomes to the individual, like who will pay what? I mean, I don't have an office chair. Well, who will pay that? Who will pay my Wi-Fi if I need a better than I have privately equipment? Wear and tear of my my carpets. I need more office space, home insurance, etc., etc. So these are practical and social, and there's also this social aspect of letting managers into your home to actually control your work conditions, because they are accountable and responsible for your work environment. Yes, so this could probably become a really interesting study, but but that is not my main interest. So I was thinking more in line of that this disruptive opportunity of revisiting the basics of work, because new working from home conditions may give rise to awareness of work-related human activities as a welcoming reminder of the basic socio-technical and work principles as we have. I don't know, but in my research, I do a lot of research in safety management and production and manufacturing industries. And we know the common success factor for businesses and organizations have always been these human activities supported and facilitated with decentralized decision-making, flatter organizations, increased democracy and dialogue between managers and co-workers, broader task descriptions and assignments, and autonomous groups and teams. Now, we also know that human well-being has implications on all human activities, and applying human factors knowledge in design improves overall system performance. So I think that this has actually already been verified with the previous speaker. That is not necessarily so that working from home has demonstrated necessarily new aspect that would change these principles. As Christina said, there might be struggles for managers, but maybe that is also because they have not for long been working according to the decentralized decision-making of flatter organizations and so on. So either the trust between local know-how and consolidating management or governance function has been reestablished and be shown to work, or if managers have a more control need than they maybe should, maybe the need for control is perceived to have increased. I just borrowed this title from Barley and Kunda, having the paper of bringing work back in, because I think that's ever needed. We see in the work I do that lean initiatives, for example, are not implemented systemically, and organizations still struggle to fully implement quality management systems. And we also see that in the areas where actually these socio-technical principles or ergonomic human knowledge has been adopted to the core of their fields, they are in many organizations assigned to particular functions, for example, work environment or safety in SHE functions, and even in safety critical businesses and so on. But so this is where I come from, and I apply this findings on working from home now. I think that we have seen in history that the attempt to emphasize the importance of these aspects in many cases actually has eroded the influence rather than the intended opposite to strengthen them. It has resulted in a detachment and isolation where many of these known ergonomic or sort of technical knowledge is moved aside of the business in general. So the point is to remember that the organizational capability for system change and well-functioning socio-technical system actually still is rare, and they were not strong before COVID-19. So towards a sustainable work from home system, let's use this opportunity to bring work back in broadly and seize this disruptive event to do so. And in the long run, we probably still need to transform working from home into a sustainable systems. So we need to make these principles revisited. And I believe that ergonomics and human factors already have this knowledge and methods to design sustainable work from home systems. Yes, so thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And of course, I think HFP can be very helpful for redesigning sustainable work from home. But of course, as you pointed out, it was not taken for granted before COVID-19, the contribution of HFP in developing sustainable work places. And so it is a big challenge to go into a new way of designing our work, including from the very beginning HFP principles. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
and then thank you. And Michelle, I will leave you the floor for next presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, our next presenter is going to be Sarah Bannatyne, and she is from South Africa, and she serves on the Council of Professional Affairs Board for Certified Ergonomists in South Africa. She herself is a certified professional ergonomist and currently conducts work in the aerospace and the defense industries. And she's also a member of the Ergonomics Society of South Africa, and today she will be presenting on behalf of ESSA. Please, Sarah, thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone, from a pretty chilly Pretoria this evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present on our findings. And as Michelle said, I am going to be presenting on behalf of the Ergonomics Society of South Africa. And tonight I'm going to be looking at a more specific topic. We're looking at the South African perspective of working from home. So working from home, it wasn't a very common phenomenon until recently, and there's definitely no prizes for guessing why we've moved towards this working from home phenomenon. And the shift to working from home has come very rapidly, and it's definitely been a game changer for companies. One study showed that the number of people working from home has increased from 26% prior to lockdown to more than 79% after lockdown. So that's a significant increase in the number of people working from home. In fact, Google Trends shows us just how much of a hot topic this is. And if we look at the graph that's here, we see that it's looking at the internet or the Google searches for working from home, searches by South Africans. And we can see at the bottom, it's looking over a 5-year period. But in the middle of last year, there was a significant increase in the number of searches for working from home by South Africans, which I thought was really interesting to show us there. Just quickly, just a few quick stats to show you. And we look at the this is on a few surveys that have been done on South Africans. I think it's taken from 3 different surveys. And we look at the coronavirus has sped up the work from home trend by 5 to 10 years for some companies. Then only 4% of South Africans want to return to work completely on site after the pandemic. And then 53% of South Africans said they would prefer a job that allows them to work from home at least occasionally. 61% of South African respondents would like some or full flexibility in defining their work hours. And then 87% have not reduced their number of work hours, and more than 50% felt that they were more motivated while working from home, and 63% said that their productivity had increased. So those are just a few of the stats that, interesting stats that we have from some surveys. I've seen a few comments and there have been a few discussions by some of the other panelists on the regulations and other regulations for working from home. And I'll just have a quick look at the South African law and what we propose regarding working from home. So there are a few legislations, South African legislations that are applicable to working from home. We've got the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the Labour Relations Act, a new one, which is the Protection of Personal Information Act, POPIA, and the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. But the act that I'd like to focus a little bit more detail on is the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and also looking at the newly promulgated ergonomics regulations that we have in South Africa. And look at how these relate to the health and safety of employees at work. So I'll start with the ergonomics regulations because they are the newest. And these regulations are intended to protect the health and safety of any person who may be exposed to ergonomics risks in the workplace. So we can see that the potential for these regulations to enhance the workplace health and safety is hugely exciting. But these regulations were literally being rolled out as COVID hit and as we went into lockdown. So they were put on a bit of hold. So we've got to acknowledge that we're still trying to get an understanding of how they can best be applied to help us with the successful and safe transition from working on site to working from home. And this is definitely something that needs to be further researched and explored further in the South African context. So, so luckily the Occupational Health and Safety Act then has been around a little bit longer, and it does give us a little more guidance on working from home. So if we look at what the responsibility of the employer is, and I think this isn't specific to South Africa, I see there are a few other countries that have very similar regulations as well, where the employers must provide a working environment that's safe and without risks to the health of its employees. And these are both mental and physical risks. And then there's also a responsibility that the employee has, and that is to take reasonable care for their own health and safety while at work. So then the International Labour Organization says that there's a shared responsibility and commitment that's required from employees and their employers to ensure that business continues and health and safety for everybody. So this is quite a big discussion, and it's a discussion right now around how far this responsibility extends, and does it extend to the home office? And this is where the waters get a little bit murky, and especially in industrially developing countries such as South Africa, it's almost impossible to expect a company to provide all the infrastructure that's required, as well as all the data that's required for employees to do their work optimally and efficiently. So there needs to be a bit of a common ground, and there needs to be a cooperation between the employer and the employees. So I'm not a legal expert by any stretch of the imagination, but my understanding is that how to go about this and how to bring about this cooperation is that the employer should inform employees of their best practices for working from home, and then encourage the employee to set their own boundaries to achieve the balance between their work and their life. The employer also has an obligation to provide awareness and training with respect to the potential risks that could be experienced when working from home. And then the employer must understand that the risk of musculoskeletal disorders actually increases over time. So there's a continuum. They've got to understand that right at the beginning of working from home, the employee might not experience these issues, but further on over time, they might then start to complain about these issues. And then the employer must also monitor the employee and take any concerns that they may have seriously. And then on the employee's side, the employee must take responsibility for their own health while they're working from home, and they must create a health and safe work area for themselves. And the employee must then also cooperate with any instructions or with the implementation of any preventative and control measures that the employer has given to them. So I think that's where we're going to get the cooperation from, is by implementing these things. So then I know some of the panelists have gone into a bit more detail on this, but what are some of the challenges that we face when working from home? And some of these challenges aren't just a South African challenge, they are global challenges. and specifically looking at distractions such as your animals and your pets, your children, your partners, you know, financial distractions, different various distractions. And then you're trying to find the optimal work-life balance as well. I think this is really important. Too much work versus too little work. And then also the feelings of isolation, boredom, lack of motivation, Zoom fatigue, meeting fatigue. These are all things that already have been thrust upon us. So we're not necessarily in a position to be able to just cope with them. And then obviously the workspace that we're in, is this optimally set up for us? And then some of the things that might be more specific to maybe South Africa, but also industrially developing countries, is things such as load shedding. And this is where we have our power cut out on a sort of regular basis to save electricity. And then also the unavailability of fast or reliable internet, or just the unavailability of internet in itself. Is a big one, and the affordability and the access to data. And then in some areas, there's just no cell phone signal. So we can't expect to have internet connection if there's no cell phone signal. So those are just a few of the issues or the challenges that we face. So then how have we adapted or coped with these challenges? And South African companies have taken varying approaches to working from home. Some have seen it as a temporary measure just while we're riding out the storm. Some of the companies have seen it as a long-term solution, and where we can save on rental, coffee, travel time for the employees, those sorts of things. And then and then the last one, which all the evidence or a lot of research is showing is probably the future of working from home, is the combination of working from home and working from the office. And then the employers have had to change their management styles. And I won't go into too much detail because some of the other panelists have already discussed it, but in really good detail and good information. So they've had to change management styles to allow for more independence, more trust towards the employees. The methods and the frequency of communication have had to change. So we've had to have more regular meetings, using Zoom, using WhatsApp, all sorts of different platforms. And then, the meeting platforms. And there's definitely been a greater awareness and appreciation for ergonomics as well from the employers, which is really encouraging to see. And then from the employee's perspective, we've had to adapt our office workspace setups. We've had to make it work for us. We've also had to manage how the interruptions and distractions from the kids and the partners and our animals. And then again, just the home-work balance, too much versus too little. And again, the employees have also had, there's definitely a greater awareness and appreciation for ergonomics amongst the employees. So what have we learned from all of this and from learning, working from home, is that humans are hugely resilient and adaptable. Working from home is here to stay for the foreseeable future. And if it's to become the norm, it's increasingly important that appropriate and efficient workspaces are made available. And then I think one of the most important things that we have realized is that ergonomics or human factors specialists have a key role to play in all of this. And that ergonomics is a key element in the management of work during a crisis such as we find ourselves in. And we'll be required to design workplaces or work systems that will allow the employees to work with more flexibility. We'll need to design work schedules and tasks that allow for sufficient rest breaks. And then we also need to build new forms of work cultures and support structures. And so I guess I'll just leave you with the question of, how do we do this in our own companies and in our own workplaces? That's the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for your presentation. You bring in, it's as we've traveled around the world virtually here, it's nice to hear the different perspectives, and I appreciate what you brought forward. I think it is really important. One couple of notes that I took note of looking at your regulations and is balancing the mental and the physical aspects of working from home. I think we're all recognizing this is very important. And then what's the responsibility of the worker and the employer, and what is that relationship, and setting those boundaries up? How often are they supposed to be communicating with each other? And as you said, there's going to be a hybrid model that I think we're going to be seeing emerging. So we got the external environment, and you brought in some cultural issues that I think we all are recognizing, depending on where we're working from home. So good questions, and thank you for proposing. I think we have a wonderful opportunity in our profession. And Sarah, I'll turn it over to you to start our questions and answer from our panelists. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again to our panelists, and thank you to all the people attending. We still have more than 200 people connected, and we have 10 questions. We have 15 minutes, so we're gonna pick some of the questions, and of course, panelists can answer later on to the other ones. So I have the first question for Bob Bridger from Somnath Gangopadhyay. And the question is, proper regulations required on WFH, working from home. Bob, please comment on that. Proper regulations required.
Regulations required?
Yeah.
Well, I think in the UK, I think we already have regulations about, I mean, legally in the UK, if you're, well, before we talk about regulations, I think there is an important distinct point to be made about working from home, is that certainly from the UK perspective, if you're going to work from home permanently, you need to have your job role reclassified as being a remote worker. So your home then becomes your workplace legally. And all of those responsibilities that already exist in legislation are transferred to your home. So I'm not sure whether we need new regulations about working from home. I think we need to have a proper systems in place to see the existing regulations are enforced, and that both employees and organizations have the resources and the know-how to enforce them. There is one thing that I would be careful about, and that is working hours, people becoming tied to the internet. There may be some in the future requirement for some regulations here. There is already a feeling that you know what it's like when you go into, before the restrictions, when you went into a new office, what's the first question you ask someone, or a new building? Have you got Wi-Fi? Because we all want to be connected. The real risk in the future is not becoming connected, but disconnecting when we need to. And I see one of the bigger risks where there might be a need for legislation in the future is some form of control about people being connected to their work 24 hours a day, which can happen in a digital world where we're all connected, but which didn't happen when you had to go to the office to work. When you left the office, that's it. You went home and you were separated from your work with a commute, as if you like a buffer, a sort of a buffer zone for you to disengage. Whereas with the internet and 24-hour connectivity, there is a danger that people will not be able to disconnect from their work. And that's probably one area where I think there might be a requirement for new legislation, when it's to do with connectivity.
Thank you, Bob. I really like this issue of having the right to be disconnected, and I think there should be some regulation on this. Thank you so much. Okay.
I've got 10 minutes to go.
Okay, next question is for Laerte. Loneliness is a great problem among Indians during work from home. They have to spend more time in work due to poor internet connectivity and less time with family. What is your views to overcome this loneliness? Please, Laerte.
Yes, it's a very challenging question, because loneliness is a really important thing to reflect about. I don't think loneliness is something that began with our work at home and our confinement. We are also alone when we are at our jobs, because if we think about new public management and other ways of managing companies, not only public, but mainly private companies, people are alone, even if we have a lot of people together. That's why some people think that it's good to be at home, because when they were at their job, at their office, they were not actually with others. They were in a very competitive scenario. This is, I think it's important also. But even it's worse to be actually alone. It's only, not only the question, do not stay with people, but one important thing to guess about management and about the collective at work is when you can face the other. When you can't face, you can ask a lot of things to people and you don't know exactly how they react to. So your question is really, really important. I think we could stay hours and hours discussing this problem, because actually when we are with others and when we are alone. And as Robert said about this connection, when actually we can be connected to the others in the other sense. It's only some reflections about it. I don't have a good answer.
No, thank you, Laerte, for your comment. And Michelle, maybe we can pick some other questions. Go ahead.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Christine, I think there's a good question for you, because it kind of gets into management here. Looks like for Michael, it seems that there's less downtime due to working from home, and commuting time is also frequently transferred to working time. So are we indeed working more hours? Are we therefore more productive? Are we just less effective? So I think it's what you were talking about, that flexibility and the shifting. Your thoughts, please.
Yes, but thank you. We actually, when we did our international study, we also looked into this, how many hours people were working, and also if they were getting more or less work done. And we can see that people, they cluster in different groups. Of course, we have people who work more hours and become more effective, but we also have people working, can we say, the normal amount of hours and becoming more effective. But we also have people working less, both hours, and getting less work done. And if we try to look into this, of course, if you look at the advantages, then there are groups that actually use these or get the benefits of the less or the fewer interruptions. So of course, then that they become more effective, they actually get more work done. And then there are people that actually use this opportunity to actually work more hours. We have had, I think most countries who had lockdowns where there was also homeschooling also saw that there was a group of people where they actually worked less and got less work done. So these people have different experiences, and they group around these different clusters. Then in a Danish survey that we have done, where we have had 3 data points in August, November, and February, where we also looked into this, then we've tried to see, can we actually identify who is it, what characterizes a group of people who can get more work done with less hours. And we haven't published this anywhere, but we are currently looking into this. But it looks like, for example, people in administrative jobs, they become more effective when they're working from home because they get less interruptions. And I guess if you think about a secretary who has to be this octopus and answer a lot of questions, people are interrupting all the time, you know, there's no more paper in the Xerox or whatever it is. But of course, when they're working from home, they become more effective. And this is what we are trying to look into. Is commuter time just being converted into work, or is it also so that there are actually some, you can say, disadvantages that we're coming to the office that we can convert into advantages when working from home? And of course, also, who is it actually that when they're working from home that they become less effective? Is it something about the social part of work, the connectivity, or they being a part of a group, a work collective or community that actually make people more effective? So yeah, we're currently looking into this, but there's no we can't say that there's one, we are not one group. We have different experiences depending on tasks and age and functions and home situation.
I think that you bring up some really good points, and I think one of them that I heard was just that what type of task and job is the individual doing, and so how does that shift between the different work settings? And as Pernilla was bringing up, that social technical systems approach that we need to look at. Sarah, so a question for you I think would be important. The question is there's one issue that needs to be looked at, particularly in developing countries, is that of sharing home space, IT, hardware, and bandwidth with one or more children who are attending school online from home, and then the children and the parental supervision. So just kind of a general question about, you know, what is that working from home life and that balance that is occurring in the home setting?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because I mean, I've got young kids myself, and you know, we've got to find the time for them to do the work, you know, the home or do the schooling, but you've also got to find the time to do your work, and sometimes this has to be at the same time using the same bandwidth. So it's on an already strained sort of system at times. So I think you do just work out a system that works for your family and works for you. And again, it's not going to be the same solution for everybody, but it just means that, you know, you've got to plan or plan in your workday, and you just know that you're going to have to sort out the children. You're going to have to sort out, you know, your husband or your wife might be sharing an office with you, and in my case that is the case, and you've just got to find something that does work for your whole family or work for you, whether it means that you have to take breaks at different times, take breaks at the same time, so that, you know, one of you's with the kids, one of you's not. You know, you've just got to find out what works for you and find that balance somehow.
Thank you. That's a very nice reflections of how we look at it. Pernilla, there was a good question for you that I think is important when we look at social technical systems and people that are working at home. It's sort of a key performance indicator, and Christine brought this up. What about creativity? Someone is asking about collective creativity in the case of working at home, and what can reinforce this creativity? I was just thinking about how that systems approach that you would be looking at. If you have some thoughts and comments on that, please.
Well, I could comment from my own work situation at the university, because we have actually initiated a huge change work environment improvement project. And I think that we have realized that just having the possibility for the breakout rooms aligned with in parallel practicing tools for inclusive meetings and tools for where you would address excluding behavior and including behavior, that has actually completely addressed a culture at our working place that has, made people long back to the office to see each other more than before. So I think that we also, again, we know creativity, we have to be able to adopt to this setting, but with Zoom. So it does require, I completely realize that not everyone is living in societies where Wi-Fi is a given and, Zoom is understood and so on. But if you have these tools for digital meetings, I think what you should practice then is the interrelation aspects and make sure that even more than before to become inclusive in meetings, because it might even be more intimidating to speak in a group when on Zoom. But we have these, again, I repeat what I said in my session, that we have these issues already to be creative in meetings and being excluding behavior and so on. So I think this is an opportunity to practice things that we will enjoy when we come back to offices, and also for hybrid solutions for the future.
Yes. Thank you. I agree. And you're bringing in some very important points. I think some of our lessons that we've learned, we're seeing a change in technology, a change in our work patterns. So now I think we just need to merge them in. And I think is the. Well, our time is up, and I would really, really like to thank very much all of the presenters. Really for your time and your effort and your thoughts, very important. At one point, we had over 250 people that were listening to you. The other two presentations that are recorded, there is some good research in there. Dr. Oatman that looks at, someone was asking about gender differences. She speaks about that in her research article. And then Professor Takashi also talks about ergonomic tips, human factors tips for the mobile office and workforce. So those links will be together with the recordings here. But again, I thank you very much, all of the presenters and our audience. And I wish you all a very safe and healthy day.